All right, let's see here. Let's see. Are we good here? Looks like yeah, we went live. Cool. All right. Well, I guess if you're on, I would appreciate you giving me a little bit of a thumbs up here. Tell me if the audio is good or not. Trying something a little different here, so let's see here. Tweak this a little. Yeah. All right. Yeah. If you're on, give me a thumbs up or drop me a comment. Let me know if the audio is good. Like I said, I'm trying something new again. Getting back to way I did it before. But yeah, sometimes the live stream stuff gets a little funky. So uh, great audio. Cool. All right, that's exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you, Donald. I appreciate that, sir. Well, I'm gonna jump right in. I hate tuning into a live stream and somebody drone on and on and on about endless stuff. So I'm gonna jump right in and start talking about stuff. So this is a 1404 carburetor that I already went ahead and disassembled. It is on a 283 3-speed automatic. I think it's a turbo 350. It doesn't really matter. But it's in a 51 or 2 Chevy truck. Kind of a nice, cool truck. Local guy, a little bit older, maybe 10, 15 years older than I am. Super nice guy, but he takes really, really, really good care of that. I'm going to show you that here because he's done a few things with how he treats this that really, really will help if you're not driving a lot, if you're only putting a couple hundred miles on a year, even a couple of thousand. It's a really, really good way of doing it that he's done this, and it's kind of cool to see because I've recommended some things. I know it works for me, but it's nice to see it replicated with somebody else. So I haven't, some of this stuff I kind of wiped off to inspect, but for the most part, this is it. This is disassembled. And the zinc and coating on all this is really good. I'll show you the inside of the carburetor here in just a quick minute. But this carburetor is a 2018 8051. So yeah, it's 2018, 51st day of 2018 is when that carburetor was made. I did a Julian date code video too, if you're ever curious on how old your carburetor is. And it's good to know approximately how old you're working on. Hey, Robert's Garage, what's going on, man? Instagram guy, I appreciate the support that you guys do for other channels over there. It's a really cool deal. So thank you for that. And certainly, if you haven't checked out Robert's Garage channel, absolutely do so. A lot of cool content. So anyway, so back to um, the date code and all that. Like I said, I did a video on how to read that date code. It's not difficult, but there's some cues on how to figure out how old the carburetor is. And really, where that becomes super important is the older these carburetors get and the more ethanol that's run through it, the worse that they are. Ethanol deteriorates everything. It eats away at the zinc, it eats away at the aluminum. And if you can do something to help that, then you're miles ahead and the carburetor will last a lot longer. Grab a towel here because what I did is I took the jets and everything out of here, but I'm going to show you inside of this carburetor. Grab a light here. I don't know how well that's going to show up on the live stream, but that is about as clean as you are going to get on a carburetor. It's got some residue in there, but it hasn't started to deteriorate at the ethanol or the aluminum like that crusty 1406 we tore apart a few weeks ago on a live stream. That's still one of the funniest things I've ever done. But yeah, that's really, really good. And I was kind of surprised when I tore it apart. Let me see if I can get some residue off there so you can kind of see it. But what he's done is He does drain the carburetor at the end of the year when he's not driving. That's a positive. That'll keep you in good shape. He doesn't. He does use ethanol, but around here in the Mid-South, we're at E10 for most of our fuel. You can get E85 most places, but yeah, I mean, that's how clean that inside of that carburetor is. And again, I don't know how well that's going to show up, but there's hardly anything on there. That's a really good deal. You're always going to get some ugliness down here in the transfer slots where the fuel comes out, but that's to be expected. But even that's not coming off. So anyway, what's the trick in keeping it that clean? That driven carb defender I discovered probably 10 years ago. Gentleman by the name of Lake Speed Jr. Yes, his father ran in NASCAR. Lake worked for Joe Gibbs Racing at the time. Joe Gibbs, at the time, they were running flat tappet engines in those NASCAR engines, and they couldn't figure out why they were wiping engines out. They were destroying them. Couldn't figure it out. Well, Lake was already starting into college at the time, and they determined that it was the lack of zinc in the oil, which you've heard a million times in a million different places. I've showed you lifters on my Instagram page of stuff that's been wiped out due to, well, it's a poor mix of oil. But anyway, that zinc story is not unheard of. Everybody's heard that. So Lake went to school to learn the chemistry behind it, and tribology is what it's called. It's the study of oil and chemical mixtures and compounds, yada, yada, yada. So long story short, Joe Gibbs Racing started the Joe Gibbs Racing Oil because of that, to work with their engines to keep their cup cars together. After a while, Joe Gibbs Racing and Joe Gibbs Oil split off. They went to market with Joe Gibbs Oil, and that's what you have seen on the market. Maybe 10, I don't know how many years ago it was, they changed the name from Joe Gibbs Racing Oil to Driven Racing Oil. And one of the products that Lake came out with during his time there was his Carb Defender. Now, Carb Defender is not some magic cure-all. It doesn't change the ethanol content in the fuel. You're still going to have that in there, but what it does is there's a additive that's in that fluid that will help protect the zinc, and it'll help protect the aluminum. And if you can kind of protect and put that corrosion inhibitor, whatever he calls it, I can't remember what the chemical compound was in there, but if you can do that, then you come apart with a really clean carburetor after using it. So I've used this stuff for, well, 10 years now. After I saw Lake at a Rottler AERA tech seminar up in Renton, Washington 10 years ago, and been using it ever since. It is a great product, works really well, and this gentleman's carburetor here, every time he fills up his tank, he drops in, now he's a 20 or 25 gallon tank on that truck. It's huge, but he uses one bottle of that every time he fills up, which is, I don't know, probably 3 times, 4 times a year, something like that. And that's what it's done. It's kept it very, very, very clean. It's very impressive. This carburetor, if he continues to take care of it, that carburetor will last forever, no matter how much ethanol he runs through there. So anyway, kind of a cool deal. I wanted to show that just simply because it works, and that carburetor is proof of it. Again, it's a 2018 carburetor. I think it's been on the road for every bit of that long. So, and it's the only reason why we took it apart now is, where is that crusty? Oh, if you all saw the video that I did on this 1406, one of the things that I discovered was the ease of getting into those transfer slots. He does have a really slight problem at part throttle, and I think it's probably around that 15 to 1800 RPM to, I don't know, that rolling into it, trying to go from probably 25, 30 miles an hour, accelerating up to 45, 55, whatever. He has just a slight little hesitation. We've been able to tune out most of it, and you really can't tell, but he drives his car enough that, or truck enough that he can tell. And he had saw the video that I did on this carburetor when we milled it down. Well, you can tell the difference. So look how the color of those two, those are the exact same material. Man, this was a disgusting 1406, but this one was really abused. But one of the things that I learned is that ability to pop out these aluminum plugs here, which I've already kind of started to manufacture ones that I think will work out. I just need to get this top part, the rivet, and get the right diameter so it's a good press fit without distorting the body at all. But one thing we learned was the transfer slots are easy to get to. And if the transfer slots are easy to get to, I think we can help improve that if we open that up just a little bit. Now, I've got some flat files that I've ordered from Goodson to try to open these up a little bit. These are very, very narrow, and you really can't take out a lot of material. But I think taking out just enough will help give just a little bit more fuel. And I'm okay if it's a little rich in that transfer slot, but what's happening is it's rolling a little lean until the rods and jets kick in, or you get the low vacuum and the rod comes up out of the jet, and you get into the step up where you get a little bit richer mixture out of the jet. Okay, so when vacuum drops, the piston comes up and allows more fuel in. Now that little bit of a time there is not that much, but if you got a vacuum gauge in your car, truck, whatever you're playing with, and you stomp on the gas, it does take a second. Well, that's all you need to feel a little bit of a hesitation. It goes away very quickly, but that's what we're fighting on his. And it's just, I've ridden in that truck a million times, and I'm hypersensitive to that kind of stuff. I feel it, especially because I know that I tuned it and I know that I rebuilt it. But anyway, I thought it was kind of an interesting thing, and so we're going to try it on his. He's going to be the guinea pig for me. But yeah, that 1406 is horrible. But next video on this one's going to be, I'm going to knock these out, and I think I'm going to try to look at the secondary side, and then we may come from the top down and try to get down into the, where the Venturi and boosters are at, and try to see if we can get anything down in there. So I'm going to try to keep an eye on the live stream chat. So if I miss your question, I do apologize. But I'm going to look here now. Will you recommend Edelbrock for somebody who doesn't know carb? Yeah, absolutely. Edelbrock carburetors are very, very easy to tune. The trouble that they have is it's like anything else. Hollies are so easy to tune, and I don't have a Holly nearby here. I got one boxed up on the other side of the garage. I'm not going to go get it. Hollies are very easy to tune because they dump a lot more fuel. The Edelbrock is really made, and the way that carburetor was designed, well, in the 50s, I think, in late 50s, is to be a little economical with the fuel. So it does take somebody that's a little smarter to tune, and that's where you run into the problem. Hollies are very easy because they dump a lot more fuel. If you put an AFR gauge on the car with a Holly carburetor, almost all of the time it's going to be it'll run richer. 14.7 is stoichiometric, which is the mathematical perfect fuel air mixture to burn. So when it burns and goes out the exhaust side, it is a perfect exhaust gas mixture. Holly carburetors tend to run in that 13 and a half area, which is not bad. I typically try to tune into that area with the Edelbrock carburetor, but you have to work a little bit. You have to change the rods and the jets. You have to take your time to do it. The Holly is very easy because it just mindlessly dumps the fuel. And it's a little bit easier to tune because it doesn't require near as much. You just put a big fat jet in it, change the power valve in it, and you're good. The problem with the Holly is the adjustment points aren't as many. The Edelbrock carburetor doesn't have any gaskets below the fuel line. The fuel line rides right there in the bowl, so these carburetors don't leak like a Holley carburetor does, especially with the ethanol deteriorating gaskets and all that. So absolutely, would I recommend an Edelbrock carburetor? Depends on the application. If you're going drag racing and that's all you're going to do, absolutely not. I would not put you in Edelbrock carburetor. Great carburetor for the street, great carburetor for fun cruising, and I can get it to perform. Matter of fact, I'm putting an 800 on the Chevelle when it's done so I can show that it does perform well. I'll probably take it to the drag strip, even though it'll be a manual car, so it's a little bit different, but it doesn't really matter. But I will show you that that carburetor will perform. Is it meant to be used on the drag strip? Not really. It's meant to be a very, very, very good street carburetor. Hollies are more for a racing use. So everything's situational with carburetors, and that's the way you have to kind of take a look at them. But yeah, if you're a street guy, depending on what you're using it for, you're not using anything funky like a power adder like a turbo or a blow through type supercharger. No, I wouldn't recommend an Edelbrock carburetor. But what I recommended for a good street car, street driver, some fun stoplight to stoplight that you still want to hammer it and boil the tires off of the thing and do fun burnouts in it, absolutely, that carburetor will be just fine. So hopefully that answered your question. How about towing applications? 650 manual choke, yeah. The Edelbrock carburetor works really good for that because it's, again, you can tune for those situations. Now towing is a really interesting thing, and I've done a couple of tow type vehicles. What was the last one I did? 75 or 7 K series, or I guess it was a C series truck, but it was converted to a tow truck. And mostly on the towing side, you'll need to spend a little bit more time with the primary side of the carburetor. Those type of engines don't typically go to 6,500. You're never going to get there. You need low torque grunt. Give it to me down low. Enjoy it and give me a lot of power so I can get a big heavy, truck, tow, equipment and whatever you're towing behind it moving. But yeah, Edelbrock carburetor works really well with that. But almost all your tuning is going to be on the primary side. Let's see here. I think I got all the questions, so cool. But really good questions. Certainly, on the towing aspect side of things, and certainly on the just a normal type of carburetor. I've done enough videos on these now that hopefully you've seen a few of them to know that they're not complicated. They're not some weird thing that can't be tuned. You just got to be smart. You just got to follow a process. And if you follow the tuning process that I've shown in the Ultimate Tuning Guide that I did, and I've broken that down into some other sections where I just explain the tuning chart and just a normal process of it, absolutely, that carburetor is very easy to work on. It's very, very easy to tune. You just got to know what you're doing. And there's enough information, I hope, so far that I put out there content-wise. If there's stuff that you want to see me explain on this carburetor, absolutely, I'd be happy to do it. Probably later on. Well, I'm going to put myself on the spot here, but hopefully by June, July of this year, when the Chevelle's done and on the road, I got to send the transmission off. I'm having the internals upgraded. Right now it's rated for that base 700 horsepower. I'm going to have the input shafts and all the other internals upgraded by American Powertrain over in Nashville. So it'll handle up to 1100 and that it'll be a bulletproof. But I got to do that first, and then the engine will go off to machine shop. But I will do some live tuning on the engine so you can see how the process that I go through. But again, everything else, you have to have the fuel system right. And again, I explain that in the tuning guide. I've got a couple of videos out there on how to set up a fuel system. It's not complicated, but one thing that any carburetor lacks is the number of adjustment points. There's not a lot of them there, and you have to be able to give yourself some more tuning ability with anything. That's what's nice about EFI is it seems like there's hundreds of parameters you can go into, and change and tweak little things in here based on the information that the sensors are giving you, and deliver more fuel, deliver more, spark, and change it in the curve of where you're working. That's why fuel injection is so great, because there's so many adjustment points. Carburetors don't have that, so you have to give yourself some of those opportunities, and one of the big ones is on the fuel system side, and it's one that people, wouldn't say neglect, but they overlook it. Ignition side gets neglected. I've seen more bad ignition systems when people come to me and say, "Hey, I put a carburetor on. I can't get it to adjust. Can you help me?" Sure, I get it. It's got 25 degrees all in timing in it. The wires are garbage. It's got the wrong heat plug or heat range on the spark plugs. You name it. And once we get all that finished, it's like, "Hey, what did you do to adjust the carburetor?" "I didn't do anything. I fixed your doggone ignition system. That's where you were having your problems. Now we can start to tune this side of it." But anyway, I don't want to go off on too much of a rant there. But anyway, I just thought I'd mention that because it'll help out anyway. Let's go back. Let's see. Alan, using a comp cam towing cam, good. Change primary jets from factory. Vacuum secondary. What's a grunt? Yeah, and typically on a towing application, that's a good, up to 4,500. I mean, you're not really getting much out of that anyway, unless you have a PTO or something where you're cranking that thing up to 3,000 RPM and letting the PTO work, and then, just cruising around and towing. You're not trying to drag race the thing, so that's good. Depending on the specs on the cam, 360, 3/4 ton. Yeah, nice. I mean, the Dakotas are a nice little truck. I've got a soft spot in my heart for those. My grandfather had one, and he only bought two new vehicles in his life, and one was a 76 Ford pickup, and then the other one was like an 88 Dakota or something like that. So got some soft spots in my heart for those trucks. But anyway, we talked about the driven. Let's get onto the cleaning side of this thing, because there's things that I haven't explained with this that I want to go into a little bit more detail on. Let's talk about brushes. Now, I very, very rarely will use a metal brush on that carburetor. The reason being is if the ethanol has deteriorated anything in here or made the zinc a little thin, if it's gotten into the aluminum in there and started to wear off the coating that's on these carburetors, the problem with that is you will start to pull that away or scratch it with a wire brush. And what that does is it gives the ethanol a place to latch onto, drop some dirt into, drop some water into it. That's the other side of ethanol. Horribly, ethanol attracts water like crazy. That's what gets into it's the ethanol that deteriorates it, but it's the water that kills everything else in these things. So I never use a wire brush because I don't want to scratch anything in there and give the ethanol someplace to attack. Occasionally I'll use a brush, but it's got to be pretty awful. I still have the bucket with all the 1406 crap, and if you did not see that video, that was the most disgusting carburetor I've probably torn apart in 10 years. And it really didn't matter really what we would have done to that, but man, that thing was awful. Give you an idea. See what the difference is there. Hey, that was disgusting. I don't know if that's going to show up that well, but yeah, horrible. But that's what it is. That's the ethanol attacking it and latching itself onto that crap. So that's why I don't use wire brushes that often. If the carburetor is bad enough where you have to use a wire brush, you need to look at a different way of cleaning it. It was one of the reasons why I bought the ultrasonic cleaner here a month or so ago. I've used them before, but quite honestly, most of the carburetors I get are either new ones that we're going to tune or ones that have only been around for a couple of years and just needs a basic cleaning. But if you have to use a brush, just a regular old nylon toothbrush is good. It's enough to just agitate it, break it apart, and then, whatever solvent. It's obviously been around forever, but carburetor cleaner is mostly what I use because, quite honestly, if you just, if the carburetor's taken good care of, then really you shouldn't need too much. You're just trying to get the, little bit of sediment and garbage out of there. But nylon brush, that is a very, very important tip. Let's see here. Dash 9. So yeah, I'm very familiar with the comp stuff. That's either a billet core or an Aus-tempered iron cam. But the Dash 9, Dash 8 comp cam stuff's really, really good. But 262, 64, yeah. The duration's the key thing. Lift, I never really look at. But yeah, that duration's good for a lot of low end. And depending on what the LSA is cut at, that'll limit the, limit the RPM in it. But in a duration cam like that, I'm going to guess that's 110, 108, 107, somewhere in there on the LSA. So different float needles. Yeah, so they've got some off-road float needles that will help the, when these carburetors get off-road, it's like anything else. Holley's the same way. That's why a lot of guys are going to throttle body fuel injection, which I think I have. Yeah. So that's why a lot of folks go with a throttle body EFI setup, because off-road it doesn't really matter the what angle the engine's at, it's going to deliver fuel. When you start to operate carburetors like that and you starve where it's going into, then you run out of power. It dies, it bogs, it chokes, it spits, it farts, whatever. So those off-road needle and seats are kind of designed to help that, but really don't need it unless you're, unless you're experiencing issues. But I very rarely have used those in a street car. So, Demon carburetor better than Edelbrock or Holley? Depends. Keith, Mr. Martin. All depends on what you're using it for. I did a really good video not too long ago on how to choose a carburetor, and the what's better, a Holley or an Edelbrock, and really there is no best. It's like saying, tell me what's the best camshaft for a big block Chevy. Like there's only one. There's not. It just all depends on what you're using it for, and depending on what you're using it for, the Demon or the Holley style carburetor might be the better choice. The Edelbrock might be the better choice. It may be better to go with a direct port throttle body and fuel injection setup. Just depends. There is no end all be all answer to that. So just all depends on what you're using it for. Let's see. 302 with nitrous. I like where you're going with that. I'll age myself a little bit. The first nitrous kit I put on was in 1985 on a 377 cubic inch stroker engine that was in a 72 El Camino. It was my first vehicle. And I've been a big fan of nitrous ever since. So in that case, because you need a lot of fuel in a nitrous engine, a mindless Demon Holley style carburetor is probably better than an Edelbrock. It will deliver a ton more fuel, and you need that. You just need to control the timing, retard it a little bit when the nitrous is on, and you'll be fine. But typically on a nitrous engine, I don't ever go the Edelbrock route. I always go the Demon or Holley route, just a little bit better, because it's going to be a lot fatter. It's going to deliver a lot more fuel. So, and that's what you need on a nitrous engine to kind of protect it. So. Let's see here. Just reading through the comments. I think I got caught up there. So I'll try to keep up. I'm bad about that usually, and I don't want to, if you're on the live stream, I want to answer your questions while you're here. So anyway, we talked about using, what type of brushes and all that. But ethanol is a killer in any carburetor. It doesn't matter what flavor it is. Holley, Demon, Edelbrock, it really doesn't matter. Quadrajet, Thermoquad. The ethanol today in fuel is one of the worst things that's happened to cars. Now, it's cool if you are going to do racing, if you want to do more on the racing side and you want to go, E85, then that's a different use. It's got some benefit there. You got to dump a lot of more of it to make the same power. But E85 in a racing application is great because you can really tune the hell out of it and you can build some great power. But for everyday cars, the newer stuff, not so much because it's made for ethanol. They're designed, the fuel systems are designed that they don't deteriorate, but these still cause problems. Ethanol still attracts water and dirt and garbage and all that other stuff. So it doesn't really matter what it's in. You're still going to run into problems with water in your fuel system, and it's one of the biggest problems that modern day vehicles have is with ethanol is the caustic nasty crap and all the water that I can't remember what the hydroponic or whatever the heck it's called, but ethanol attracts water. So but anyway, that's the biggest killer for any of these carburetors is ethanol, and that's why this carburetor is really nice and clean, is because he took really good care of it with a carb defender. And then I think he stops driving. Like I say, mid-south here we get you can get 70-degree days in November, December. So I think he usually puts it away and right after Thanksgiving somewhere in there. And we're about ready to break it out. We got some 70-degree days this week and should be pretty nice. But it's only a couple of months. But he does drain the carburetor, keeps all the crap out of there. Let's talk a little bit about the disassembly here because I want to talk a little bit about this. One mistake that I made really, really a long time ago when I was younger was, reach across here, was using a power tool to disassemble. And sometimes I will do it if I know the carburetor's in good shape, but I never use power to assemble or disassemble these. They're not that complicated, and you really shouldn't, just simply because these aluminum body carburetors, and Holley's the same way with the pot type metal that they use. You don't want to get anything crossed in there, or worse, if you've got some threads that are a little more ugly, and I'll dig into the crappy 1406, but you got some threads that are this one's funky, a little ugly. You don't want to rifle those out as quick as possible. If you run into a situation where you're removing, the hardware out of that carburetor and it starts to budge up on you, then you can at least work it a little bit. With a power tool, it's mindless. You're going to rifle it right out of there. You know what? We haven't talked about beer yet, and I hate to tell you this because last couple of times I've had some really good beers, but I'm just into the Michelob Ultra tonight, so don't unsubscribe or unfriend me because of that. Whatever. Beer's beer to me. I enjoy it. So, cheers to you. All right. So, anyway, I guess that's another tip: is don't use power tools. Take your time. It's not that it's not that difficult. You can use like a ratcheting, style. For the Torx bits and the, well, that was an older carburetor, so it had some blade hardware in there. But for the most part, just use a regular old screwdrivers and you'll be better off with that. The layout here. Now, I typically, when I do this, when I take these apart, I just throw everything into a bucket. Other than the, these are horrible. Other than the floats, I usually take very good care of these. Man, this thing was just coated with crap. The floats are something you have to be they're a little more delicate, but everything else in there, I usually just throw into a bucket, and that way I can, hit it with some carb cleaner, hit it with the brush a little bit, and then take it out, and I'll usually lay it out a little bit after that. But if you've never done one of these before, it's better to kind of lay things out in order. Now, one little thing here that I do is, or I teach people that have never done this before, is if you are, working on this carburetor, and this is the first one you've done, and you lay it out, don't know if you can see the front, but if you lay it like that and you label it that this is the rear of the carburetor and this is the front, and lay things out in little, segments and areas, it becomes a little bit easier if you keep the hardware together. So you know where it all came from. The links on some of this hardware is a little bit different. That's the primary. Um, and then here's the ones on the secondary. The links are a little bit different. So just keeping the booster stuff is will make things a little bit easier for you if you've never done that before. So if you're new into tearing one of these down, any carburetor, again, this really kind of bleeds over into whatever flavor you're working on. Definitely lay things out. So whatever it makes easier for you to figure out what's going on and where you need to be and kind of how it all came apart. It's another little thing that will teach people to do, but after you do a few of them, you just kind of remember what length hardware goes where and where the boosters go and where the secondary valve goes, and it's not that complicated. Other things like the little baffles here, they only go in one way, so you can't really screw them up. Same with the boosters. You don't really need to mark these left or right because they will only go in one way. Okay. So anyway, little tip there. Like I say, if you haven't worked with that before, it's better to kind of give yourself some room there. Yes, I must have a refreshing drink. I kind of have to laugh. Maybe a year or so ago, I was doing a live stream, and somebody had dropped $5 on a super chat type of deal, whatever, which I always appreciate, which is kind of cool. And his tip was start a Patreon so I can buy you a beer. And I thought, you know what, that's a heck of a good idea because I like beer, and sure, if I can help you, and you want to say thank you with a beer. So I've got, I don't know, a couple of folks on Patreon. Usually it's folks that will just pop in there and just donate the one time and buy me a beer. And trust me, I absolutely use that to buy beer with. So even if it's Michelob Ultra, so I do appreciate that. But I do laugh every time I see that in there every month. So I do appreciate if you donated there or on a super chat or whatever. It's kind of fun, and I do appreciate it because beer is good. So. All right. Now I forget. We started talking about beer and everything else kind of went away. So anyway, yeah, just lay things out, and then like I say, the labeling will help, left, right, whatever it takes to help you do this right. Used to be years ago, there was something online where you could print out like 4 pages of 8.5 by 11 or whatever size that a normal sheet of paper is, where you print out 4, and then if you laid them out, it would lay out everything on it kind of in to scale. So the baffles would go in, the needle and seats would go in one area, and you could kind of keep track of it. But I haven't seen that in quite a few years. I don't know if it's still online. Maybe I'll create one and throw it on somewhere, but whatever. So anyway, one thing I want to talk about too is we talked about not using metal brushes. Well, I'm going to quantify that just a little bit. These little brushes I buy for like $2 for the set at Harbor Freight, or if you're a Canadian, Princess Auto, or Northern Tool, or one of those. But they're like $2 for the set, and I think occasionally they'll go on sale, or there'll be a coupon where you can buy the set for $1. So I usually buy like 4 or 5 of these at a time, because I usually, depending on the time of year, this time of year is starting to get a little bit more busy. More folks are looking to start to get on the road. So I'll rebuild probably 5 or 6 carburetors a month, but during the year I'll maybe do 2 a month. But I use these on every one. These really smaller ones are good on some of the passages here, and then You've got some that are a little bit bigger. Now they are metal, but they're so easy, but it'll help you get some of the garbage out of there. So it's a nice little tip. You know, most folks don't have a small little, um, you know, brush set like that. They're really kind of particular, I guess. You know, from buying a real small set like that, and most people don't think about that. They've got a regular, wire brush or whatever, or toothbrush, and, you don't see that. So anyway, those are a nice little one. If you're going to rebuild a carburetor, these are usually typically, if the carburetor's not too god awful, like these were, I didn't even bother cleaning them. That one I actually cleaned up. This one I didn't clean up. I don't know if you can see that, but I just hit that with a brush to. Actually, that went into the ultrasonic cleaner. This one didn't. So, but there's a lot of garbage down in there, and these little brushes are handy. So, anyway, Harbor Freight, if if you buy stuff in Bald Eagles, and Princess Auto if you're buying stuff in Maple Leaf Dollars. So anyway, nice little deal to keep. Like I say, I use them all the time, but I usually, if the carburetor's not horrible, they'll last me for 4 or 5, and then because I'm impatient, I'll bend one of these, and or bend it going in, and and end up trashing them. But I use most of them. There's the biggest one I don't use that often, but it is good for getting down in some of these passages that you can't get to, that you want to hit with a little bit of a brush. So they work out very well for that. So anyway, nice little deal there. I don't know if they've got these on Amazon, but if they do, I'll probably leave a link to them after the fact. But that's a nice little tip. Buy yourself a set or two of those. You'll use it. Let's see here. Just look at the live stream, see if there's any questions. I think I got everybody. I still laugh seeing the beer comments. So anyway, I do appreciate it. Another thing when it comes to cleaning, like some of these really small openings and orifices, okay, you got a few in here as well. It depends on the size, but I use mostly a 22 gauge, and it's stainless steel wire, okay, and that wire is really, really good if you get into a little bit of a blockage when you're trying to put the smaller Harbor Freight brush in there. If you try to put that in there and it gets stuck, sometimes running the wire through there, sorry, I'm getting too close to the camera. Sometimes running that wire through there will help you clear that out, make sure that you've got the passages clear. Smaller size on the little pickup tubes here, but yeah, that 22 is what I use most common, but because I use some different sizes in some other, I'm not going to talk about that here, but I did it on another live stream on how to get a little bit more fuel on the primary side. You use a little bit of wire to block off a passage or restrict a passage, and it will cause some fuel to get routed a little bit differently. So, but anyway, that's a very, very inexpensive. The stainless wire is always a good one to have around. I don't know that I would use that on as safety wire, but it's kind of that same type of deal. You can buy these rolls. Typically, I buy these at the air gas place that I shop. They typically have tons of stuff like that. So if you're buying welding gas, shielding gas, whatever, they'll typically have this, or I think Amazon. So anyway, another little tip there. All right. Okay, let's see, what else have we not talked about here. Yeah, I did mention just a minute ago, now I'm looking at the floats here. I'm going to lay the disgusting ones out here so you can see what these things look like compared to a nice clean set. But anyway, you have to be a little careful with the floats. Now, anytime I take these out of a carburetor, whether they look brand new or not, and you can even see the fuel line on there. I don't know if you can, yeah, you got to see that discoloration on there. Okay, that's where the fuel level's ridden. And it's easy to see on the crappy one. But even then, the ethanol is starting to deteriorate it away. Even though he uses that carb defender, he takes really good care of this thing. And he's only running E10 in there. You can still tell where the ethanol is deteriorating away. But anytime I tear apart a carburetor, one of the first things I do when I'm going to clean it and put it back together is I will take these and dip them in mineral spirits. I don't dump them in raw fuel, just because it's not smart to work on with raw fuel in a little one car garage, or whatever you're working on. Just it's not smart. It's just too flammable. So mineral spirits is good. Dunk these in there. I will usually weight them so I can keep them fully submerged. Leave them in there for an hour or two. That's all you need, and then pull them back out. If you shake it and you can hear fuel sloshing around or splashing in there, beating itself in there, then you got a pinhole in the float, and you need to replace them. Edelbrock sells these. They're a service repair part, so they're not difficult to get a hold of, but they're delicate. They're very, very easy to tweak. If you squeeze them too hard, I've seen the seams split on them, but you have to be a little careful with those. But these were certainly not very well taken care of. So, all right. So anyway, another little tip there is just to take good care of the floats. Not like those were, because that is the most delicate thing. Now, typically when I put all the hardware into that bucket, again, the floats will stay out of there, and the choke housing as well. But the floats will stay out of there because I don't want them getting beat up with anything else. That's just a trash pile, so I just saved it for demonstration purposes, I suppose. But everything else within this carburetor is real simple. It's not complicated. It's just hardware and baffles and boosters and the secondaries, and you're not going to screw up anything. One thing we've talked about a number of times though, and I noticed this on this one, and I'm a little concerned by this because as far as I know, I am the only one that has done tuning on this carburetor, and I know it wasn't me. But when you pull out the needle and seats, the idle mixture screws, I've talked about this, I think, when we did the milling down of the carburetor. I think we talked a little bit about that when I did this video. That happens to be those little holes right there is where these push down into. And then when you tighten them down, they go down in there. Now, when you over tighten them, sometimes, which is a good thing, put that crusty carburetor down. And here's where this one bothers me. If you can feel a little ridge, run a thumbnail or fingernail along there, you can feel any little ridge, it means that these have been over tightened. Now, I'll probably have to do a separate video on just idle mixture screws, because for some reason it is the one and only thing people touch when they put a carburetor on. They'll go, yeah, I think I need a 650 or an 800 CFM carburetor on what I'm working on. They'll bolt it on, they'll hook up the throttle linkage, they'll hook up the manual or electric choke, whatever they've got, and then they'll start farting around with the idle mixture screws. Literally, I set these once and I damn near never touch them again. They're not a magical thing. They're not going to drastically change what's going on with the engine. Once you get it right and they're close enough, it's almost good enough. You're not going to, once you get past 1,000 RPM on an Edelbrock carburetor, you are out of that circuit anyway. Nothing that you have done with this is going to make a bit of difference. You are into the main metering circuit at that point, and fuel is going to start flowing. Well, we milled it off. You can't see it. It's going to start flowing through the main metering circuit into the transfer circuits, and that's where it's getting all your fuel from, and through the booster as well. Okay, so once you've done that, or once you get past that 1,000 RPM, none of that stuff matters. But for whatever reason, people love to monkey with these things, and it just astonishes me, I guess, because you don't get anything out of it. You're not getting much more. You're not going to get a lot of seat of the pants feeling out of it. You may affect the idle, because that's the circuit is the idle circuit. You may affect a little bit of that, but not a whole heck of a lot. So anyway, if I run my, like this one's really bad, and I can't figure that out. So I don't know if he monkeyed with that after it sat, for a winter, and yeah, but that's bad. I mean, they're bad enough that you can hit it with a little bit of emery cloth, excuse me, or something like that. But you can't alter the size of that, because it is, keep back going to the crusty old 1406 here, because it's going to change how it meters fuel through that hole. Okay, and if you make this smaller, it's going to go further in there. So, or it's going to let more fuel by, and then you're going to keep monkeying with these even more. Again, these aren't a magical thing, but that's one thing to look at when you are cleaning it, to be able to tell if somebody has over tightened these down. And again, this disheartens me a little bit. And I'm going to have to ask him, hey, did you monkey around with your idle mixture screws? And he's going to go, yeah, I need it to idle a little bit better after the winter time. I'm almost 100% guess that that's what it is, because I haven't been into this carburetor in 2 years, and I haven't touched it in 2 years. But anyway, it's one to look at, and these are a service item through Edelbrock. If you get one of these that has a ridge on it, replace them. You can buy new ones. Typically, you got to order them. O'Reilly, AutoZone doesn't carry these, but you can buy them through some at Jags, Amazon, or direct from Edelbrock and whatever. Vape wire. Sure, I am a little too old, I guess, for that reference. I do not vape, if that's what you're referring to. Don't know. But anyway, I think that's where caught up on the chat. So anyway, just one little thing to keep in mind is it's a part of the process. When you go through the tuning process, yeah, you are going to touch that, and you are going to play with these a little bit, but really once you get it set, you're going to mess with the speed screw, for the idle speed and what RPM you're going to idle at, much more than you're going to monkey with those. Okay, so just something to keep in mind. When it comes to the little step-up springs that are here in the that hold the piston and the rod here, and then you got the jet that goes. Oh, that is the front. So these you have to be a little careful of also. Now these have been in there long enough and had enough fuel through there that, unless my eyes are deceiving me, or I guess they are still the silver. So, but yeah, sometimes I've seen these where they're color coded. Now, I don't have a tuning kit here close by, but the tuning kit will come with different color springs: blue, pink, silver, red, I think. Oh, no, now I'm confusing myself. But anyway, sometimes the ethanol will eat that away from there, and you'll forget what it is. So typically when I tune, like I gave him a tuning chart that the tuning chart that is used for this 500 CFM that you can print online. We've gone over that tuning chart, and again, the Ultimate Tuning Guide, and then I did a separate video on just how to read the tuning chart. I will mark what I've put in there. That way he has a record of it. That way, if I move away, pass away, whatever, the next person to come along and tune it will at least know the base of what they're working on. They don't have to go back to the factory and then start retuning. They can at least tune based on that. But again, that's one little thing you need to be careful of. But these typically you don't need to be cleaned. I don't even usually wipe them off. I just hit them with a little bit of carburetor cleaner, and it's done. So, but again, same with the rods. I will wipe these off, but I don't ever hit it with emery cloth or anything like that, because if you change the diameter of these, you change how it steps out of the jet. Again, when that, you can see that. So when that is cruising, at idle, whatever, and the vacuum's high, okay, the piston is down, okay. Spring goes up in there like that, and the piston is collapsed on the spring. High vacuum will pull that down. When you get into, rolling into wide open throttle, or you just stab the gas hard, whatever, or even if you're rolling into it and the vacuum starts to drop in the engine, the reference from the vacuum port in there will let this raise up. It gives you a little bit more richer, and it gets into the little bit narrower step. Again, I don't know how much you can see on the camera there, but it pulls it out of the jet, and that way it gives you a little bit more richer fuel mixture. So again, we haven't really talked too much about that part of it, I don't think, in any other video. But again, those are easy to clean, but I never monkey with the jets and the rods too much. Just make sure there's not a lot of garbage in them, and then if there are, or they're discolored, like these are a little discolored, a little more discolored than I'm used to seeing, then I'll replace them. But these are fine. There's no, I can't feel any material or garbage on there, so they're probably all right. Oh, we'll go back to the beer and then keep reading here. Last metering rod springs, a 300 duration cam. John Weaver, yes. Kind of depends, but yeah, 300 on the duration side is certainly long. Depending on what you're using that for, if it is a street cruiser, type of thing, then yeah, maybe the Edelbrock isn't the right carburetor for you. The Holly tends to be a little bit better, but then you're farting around with power valves at that point, and it really doesn't matter because they're far more temperamental than the step-up springs. But yeah, you're probably okay with that because you don't have enough vacuum to operate the thing. The stiffer the spring, the higher the vacuum the engine. And if you're a low vacuum engine, which typically a long duration camshaft will, I guess depending on what the LSA of the cam is, but for the most part, anything that's at 280, 290, 300 duration, yeah, you're going to have horrible vacuum. So, but yeah, that sounds about right. Let's see here. Edelbrock carburetor, the set screws are completely closed. Engine still running. Yeah, that's probably, if you've got these that are all the way screwed in and seated and there is no change to what's going on, there could be a couple of different things. Let me grab a little swig of this and I'll explain. Thank you for that. This one I noticed was a little off, but I think it's the way we set the idle on it last time. Okay. I'm going to show you this a couple of different ways here. I'm really happy that I kind of milled this thing down. I was disappointed that kid picked up a crappy carburetor, but I was happy that I had one that I could trade him for and use this one to mill down and use it as a demonstration piece. But I felt bad for him, But anyway, it's a good demonstration tool. That transfer slot, which is right there, okay. If your throttle blades are cracked open a little too much and you are more exposed of that transfer slot, I don't know if you can see that on the video. If you're a little more exposed on that, which means your RPM is going to come up a little bit more, then yeah, you could screw in those idle screws and not affect the idle of the engine. If you back them out a little bit and back these plates so they're a little more closed, so half the slot is open, which is all you really need on the idle side, then yeah, you might be able to get a little bit more use out of the mixture screws on the idle side. Okay. I don't know how well that you can see that. I can't see the camera, but those are the slots. You can see the light coming through there, and the holes right underneath there are where the idle mixture screws go into. Okay. When you have these more exposed, more fuel gets into the venturi, and you get more fuel going through there. Okay. So if you close that blade down, if you close that blade a little closer, and if I imagine if you took that carburetor off, you are probably like this one where it's a little more exposed. Like this one, I'm going to ask him if he's monkeyed with this at all, because they typically try to keep these fairly closed, but he doesn't have a really long duration cam in there. Doesn't need a lot of fuel. It's a 252 comp flat tappet grind, so it's I hate to say it, it's an RV cam. I really hate that term, but really low duration. So he really doesn't need this. So I'm wondering if he played around with it a little bit. But that's the reason why, is if you're not getting any adjustment out of those mixture screws, it's because I'm going to guess that the throttle blades are open enough that you're getting a lot of fuel through the transfer slot. And my question to you would be, are you running into any off idle stumbles where you're at idle, you put it in park or you put it in drive, or you're in first gear on a manual, let the clutch out, and roll heavy into the gas? Do you hesitate a little bit, or does it roll right in really aggressively and you're good to go? If it's if you're getting a little bit of a hesitation, it's because there's not enough going on there with the transfer slot to help you with that off idle stumble. That's why I keep going back to this. That's why I'm going to I've ordered those little flat files, diamond files from Goodson, so I can start opening these up a little bit and modifying these myself, which we're going to do on this one, because he is going to, I think he said he was going to make a cam change, which I just remembered now that I think about that, because maybe that's the reason why. But he did have a little bit of an off idle stumble that we were going to try to figure out with that engine, and he wanted me to try that after seeing this video, but he'll be the guinea pig there. So that'd be my guess there. Let's keep reading here. Screws completely closed. Yeah, I mean that's the other side of it too. I mean, you could be you could be letting more in on the metering side, but on the main circuit. But again, main circuit is doesn't come into play on the rods and jets till you're 1,000 RPM or over. So it would be that I would kind of question a little bit of that. But that's what's really hard about doing these Q&A here, because if you and I were standing in a garage someplace drinking beer and we were talking about it, we could start taking a look at some things and go, oh, yeah, you know what? I bet you we could kind of correct that, and then it'll affect all these other little things, and we can keep working. So a lot of times I guess at a lot of this, even though I think most of the times I kind of get it close to being right, or at least give you a path that gets you started down the way you need to. But sometimes it's hard to. But typically, if you're pulling it past the rods and the jets, you're out of that 1,000 RPM range. So never used to do this. Just got the car though. Yeah, I mean that's part of it too. If you just got the car and you've never been into the carburetor before, if it's running okay and running fine and you're not displeased with it, you're okay with how it's operating, then yeah, leave it alone. But what I would tell you is if you just bought the car, and it doesn't matter what carburetor is on there really, there's a couple of things I start with first. When anybody comes to me with a problem, and again, I mentioned this, oh gosh, I've been on for an hour. I mentioned this at the beginning. A lot of times it's the stuff that gets neglected. That's the problem. And I've fixed so many problems that people say are carburetor problems, and they keep trying to hit the mixture screws to get it fixed. It's ignition. Their ignition's wrong. Maybe it's a ready to run style distributor from Fast, or Pertronics or something, and they don't have the right advanced springs in it, or the timing isn't set correctly. It fires up, it starts, it runs. That's all they thought about. They think it's okay. The rocker arm, the lash isn't right on the cam. You name it, there's 100 little things, and typically that's where I start. I start ignition first, I look at fuel system next, and then I will look at carburation when I go to adjust that. So when I buy a vehicle that I've never had my hands on, that's where I start. I start on ignition, then I start looking at the fuel and everything else after that. The fuel system is critical. Again, I did a video on how to properly set up a fuel system, because again, it's a neglected part of how these things are all put together. And again, you can buy the best carburetor and spend the right money and have somebody dyno tune it and send you the carburetor based on what your the specs are in the engine and the racing or the driving that you're doing, whatever. But if the ignition's wrong and the fuel system's wrong, it doesn't matter what they did to the carburetor. And then it's always the thing that takes the blame. You spend $1,000 to have an AED carburetor put together, and they get sent to you bolted on, and it still runs like crap. Well, man, that carburetor is a hunk of junk. No, it's not. You got the wrong fuel system on there. You don't have a pressure regulator on there. You don't have it adjusted right. You don't have the right fuel filters on there. You don't have the fuel filters in the right spot. You don't have the right type of element in there. There's 100 little things. And if you get all those things right going forward, the carburation side is easy. I get people all the time that send me a message on Instagram or here, whatever, say, how the heck did you learn all this stuff? It's because I figured out all the mistakes that I made on the ignition and the fuel system side. If you get those things too right, the carburetors are easy to adjust, and I don't care what it is. And that includes quadrajets, thermoquads, Edelbrocks, the old Weber carburetors, Hollies, Demons. Doesn't matter what they are, they're fairly good. They're easy to tune, but you got to get all the other stuff right first. So anyway, off my soapbox on that one. Another swig of beer. Yeah. So like I said, if you just got the car, that's typically where I start. Is hit those basics. And once you get those right, like I said, everything else goes pretty easy. I guess another thing I wanted to talk about too is I did the video a couple weeks ago because I bought the ultrasonic cleaner, which I've done. Well, I did the 1406 in it, and I mean, you could have had, whatever in there, and it wasn't going to clean that hunk of junk. But the cleaner, the ultrasonic cleaner has been really good, and what I'm still looking for the right combination of stuff. For this carburetor here, it won't go in the ultrasonic cleaner. There's no reason to. It's a fairly clean carburetor. Hitting it with the little brushes, a little bit of carburetor cleaner, and it's going to go right back together. Matter of fact, we're not even going to use a gasket kit on it. The gaskets are in great shape, after 2 years. So all the gaskets were in really good shape. They're not brittle. They still have some flexibility to it. They're in good shape. So not going to need it. But one thing that I will make mention of is I had somebody not too long ago say, well, I use Simple Green to clean a carburetor. And it's not a horrible idea, but anything that is really, really caustic, and Simple Green is painfully caustic. When they say to dilute it, most people will go, well, if I don't dilute it with water and I use pure Simple Green, then it'll clean better. No, it'll just start to eat away at whatever you're trying to clean. So you have to be very, very careful with it. You've got to flush it out with water. And people go, you dunk your carburetors in water? Well, yeah, if I was going to clean it with Simple Green, absolutely. That's what the ultrasonic cleaner is uses water. And then whatever cleaner you add to it, a little bit of dish soap, whatever. But I'm still trying to find that. But anyway, I had someone recently, it wasn't really a question, but they had mentioned it. So I wanted to make mention of it, that just be careful what you use. Now, carburetor cleaner is fairly caustic in itself, but it's designed, I guess I don't know if it's designed that way, but carburetor cleaner evaporates eventually anyway. So, you can spray it on there and start to break up whatever you're working on, and it's not going to deteriorate the metal like something really caustic like Simple Green would. So I think I said I was going to have another drink, and I never did. So all right. Well, I guess that's pretty close to everything I wanted to talk about, really. I hadn't done a cleaning video, and I didn't want to do, just a regular old production, type video where I just shoot it and edit it, whatever. I always like doing these live streams because it's fun to get your questions and certainly answer any questions that you have, because we talked about a lot of other stuff here other than just cleaning a carburetor. And I love that. I love answering those questions. If you're not following me on Instagram, you can always follow me over there. Send me a message anytime. I do. I answer every question that I get. Even some of the weird ones that are a little inappropriate at times, but what the heck, it doesn't bother me too much. But anyway, I think that's pretty close to it. Like I said, I wanted to do this live stream style because, again, it's fun, and I don't mind doing them this way. And the interaction to me is just as fun as, doing the video and, being a little creative on that side of it. So anyway, hope you got something out of that. Some little tips. Like I said, there's always something, cool that you can use and work with on the cleaning side of stuff. Again, I get a lot of people that I've recommended that carb defender to before in the past, and they're like, it's just snake oil. Well, the additive in it to keep the ethanol from eating away at everything isn't snake oil. That's what it's designed to do. It doesn't change the properties of the ethanol. Ethanol is going to be there. It just helps keep the crap moving and keep everything from deteriorating. And that carburetor is a great example of that. Again, that was an early 2015 or 2018 carburetor, and I don't know when he bought it, but I know it's been in service for most of that time, and that's a fairly clean carburetor. So, and like I said, it's been in service for a couple of years too. So, but anyway, I guess I'll answer any last minute questions here. Let's see. Yeah, I think I got them all. So anyway, I guess I will hang out with you here for another quick minute, but if that's it, I'm going to go ahead and get a few more things done in the garage here. Chevelle, again, transmission's coming back out to go to American Powertrain. That's getting done. And then hopefully, they said they had all the parts to do it, thank God. With as crazy as everything has been on back order the last year with COVID and all that, they fortunately had all the the hardened input shafts and the cryogenically cold treated stuff is all there. So they said they could turn it around within a week or two. They weren't too backed up, but looking forward to getting that back, and then we'll get back to a couple more videos on the Chevelle, and again, hopefully maybe mid-year is kind of what I'm shooting for, even though it's already March, and I haven't even got the transmission done yet. So, but yeah, by then we'll do I probably won't do a live tuning video on how to tune a carburetor, but I'll show you the process how I go through with the big block that's going in the Chevelle, the 800 that I'm putting on the Chevelle, and then I may, more than likely, I may end up doing that modification on the transfer slot, and I will for sure do the modification that we didn't talk about today on the accelerator pump, because I think by going up in there and opening up that slot a little bit, you'll have to look at the video that I did to mill that down. I just did that video 2 weeks ago, something like that. I'm going to open that up a little bit, probably on the 800 for the Chevelle. I'll use mine as a guinea pig. That way, if I jack it up, it'll be on me. But he's trusting me with his 500, so I think we'll be okay. The plugs are going to be the hard part. I've already got that figured out. And then as soon as the files come in, it's just a matter of moving a little tiny bit of material and we'll make it go. So anyway, yeah, so I guess if there's no more questions, I'm going to get a few more things done here tonight, and then we'll go from there. So again, I appreciate you guys watching. I couldn't have told you, 6, 7, 8 years ago, whenever it is I started this channel, that I'd have 5,000 subscribers. Who the heck's going to watch an Edelbrock carburetor video, or supercharger video for a Silverado, or tuning guide or anything like that? Who's going to watch that stuff? But 5,000 of you subscribed, and I'm going to hit 1 million views here sometime, and to me that just blows my mind that 1 million views on this channel is kind of crazy. So anyway, again, I hope you got something out of it, and for sure, don't hesitate. Always drop a question in any of the videos, and I'm always happy to get back to you. So again, Instagram's always a good spot too if you want to drop me a note over there too. So anyway, I guess we'll wrap it up, and very cool. Well, I will catch you guys on the next one. Oop, as I bump the camera. And again, I do appreciate you guys watching. Y'all are awesome. Just I can't say thank you enough. And I got some cool stuff planned for this year as well too, and really looking forward to that. And again, if you want to buy me a beer, Patreon links down there. Again, I do appreciate that because I do go through an awful lot of beer. So anyway, I guess we'll catch you guys on the next video. I don't know if I'm gonna have a 2-minute tech video this week, but we'll see. I haven't really thought about it yet. But anyway, I'll pop in here real quick. Dude knows his stuff. You know the reason why I know my stuff, Mr. Baker? It's because I made an awful lot of mistakes playing with this stuff, and you learn by those, sometimes more painfully than not, but I do appreciate that, and certainly if there's anything I can ever do for any of y'all, you know, hey, we're a car community. It doesn't matter who we are, you know, what we do for a living and or what we're driving, Ford, Chevy, Mopar, Honda, I don't really care. If it makes horsepower, it's fun. So, yeah, I always like helping folks where I can, and certainly I've asked for help a million times in my lifetime, so I'm just kind of hopefully paying it forward a little bit or paying it back, one of the two. And cool. So anyway, I guess we'll catch you guys, I don't know, sometime this week on Tuesday, or I'll catch you next Saturday on the next video. So cool. We'll catch you guys later.